Today on the Transformers Slag podcast, we are going to be doing a early review of the very first episode of Transformers Earthspark. We caught a early screening of the very first episode, and we're going to give our 2 cents on what we've seen thus far, all the little tidbits and stuff in the background. So forewarning in advance, there's going to be some spoilers for this. So let's jump into it. It's very interesting how they tackled this. I just want to say from the start, the animation is a very big breath of fresh air. I really like what I see in terms of the animation because, I don't know, I guess the Netflix series really made us take a step back, and now we're back to something that's a little more high budget, and I like that a lot. So I just wanted to say that off the bat, that what we're looking at visually is quite a step up than what we were seeing from Netflix just through the past couple of years. So let's start with episode 1, go through it, give you my thoughts, and a lot of good stuff. So the show opens up with Swindle and Hardtop getting ready to steal some an Energon stash from the Autobots. Of course, this was all a trap set by Optimus Prime and Elita. I love how well they animated Elita 1 in this series, especially like the way she fights and everything. A little bit of Wing Chun going on there with her fighting style, and I saw a Shoryuken there too, even from Street Fighter. She looks amazing in it. I so far, she's the best animated of all the robots we've seen thus far. I just like the way how the animators really focused on her and made her look really good. A whole bunch of arachnoids show up and they attack Prime and the others, and we're all supposed to be like, whoa, who are they? Like, what's the story with this? And we'll find out later, of course. I like how both the Decepticons of Hardtop and Swindle, how they're paired up. And I don't know if it's a coincidence because those two characters, specifically Hardtop, because Hardtop is one of those weird trademarks with Hasbro. It was originally a G.I. Joe character in 1987. He's most famously known for being the figure that came with the Defiant, that absolutely massive space vehicle in the G.I. Joe toy line. And then later on, that trademark was used for the Cops toy line within Hasbro, and then it was attached to a Cybertron toy named Hardtop. And then that Cybertron toy was repainted into Swindle. So I wonder if they were put together because of that Cybertron repaint connection. It sure is a coincidence if that's the case, or the writers or the showrunners or someone really knew what was up. Just want to point that out. So then we're introduced to our human characters for this adventure, the Malto family, who have freshly moved from Philadelphia, born and raised, and the playground is where they spent most of their days. But Robbie just wants to go back home. You know, he's bored living over there. They have no Wi-Fi. The internet is crappy there in Witwicky, Pennsylvania, which, by the way, is not a real place. I looked into it beforehand just to be double sure. So don't bother trying to look it up. So, you know, he does the typical thing, fights with his family, problems at dinner, goes up to his room, he rebels, he goes out the window, he gets his bike, and he vows to bike back to Philadelphia, which, let me tell you this right now, according to Google Maps, that's about a 16-hour bike ride nonstop, so good luck, Robbie. Of course, his sister chases after him late into the night while they're biking. They get to this overpass bridge, and as they're crossing that bridge, a bunch of arachnoids are ambushing a bunch of government vehicles, which we would later learn are ghost vehicles, Ghost, the government agency, which we'll talk about more later. And they just, they get blown and they get out of the way. They fall off the bridge. And then we get something, I swear I was getting these deja vu feelings from the very first episode of Transformers Armada, or the Japanese version, Megatron no Detsetsu, which was, and we're going to parallel it here, two kids with their bikes find a cave. They go into that cave. It collapses. They fall deeper into the cave and then find a Cybertronian relic, which they touch, which then gets all glowy. And then they end up spawning a Cybertronian, and then they create a deep bond and connection with that Cybertronian. All of that happens in the same span almost. So, of course, in Armada, that's Rad and Carlos, leading to the finding of the Minicons. And in the case of this show, they go into this glowy cave. They find what looks like, I want to say, an Energon cube or something like that, some kind of Energon shard or some kind of relic. and they touch the relic and everything goes crazy and glowy. And then there's some Cybertronian lines that are written all over the place, and you hear the legacy of hope, the legacy of hope. And of course, when you translate that Cybertronian, it says the legacy of hope, so you don't need to do that. And then we're introduced to 2 new Cybertronians that are born out of the primordial ooze, which is Thrash and Twitch. The kids seem to understand what Thrash and Twitch are thinking and feeling because of their new cyber sleeves or Cybertronian sleeves that were superimposed on them when they touched that Energon rock or that Cybertronian relic. And, they create this bond, they create this connection. And then, of course, there was an arachnoid that was following them this whole time, so they attack, and then Twitch, Prime RC style, transforms her wrist and kills the arachnoid with a wrist blaster, which then, of course, confirms to Robbie that, well, these robots are clearly Transformers. So they opt to bring them back home because they got some brand new robot toys from Toys R Us, and they want to bring them back. We jump forward to Dr. Meridian Mandroid's lab or lair, where he's removing the captured Hardtop's arm. Clearly, it looks like due to the press images that we've seen and toy images and everything of Dr. Meridian Mandroid, Hardtop's arm is going to be Dr. Mandroid's arm. We see in the scene that he's missing an arm. We don't know the story with that, but clearly he's replacing his limbs and everything with Cybertronian ones, soon to become more machine than man, I guess. But we'll see with that. Back home with the kids. The kids hide the bots in the barn, make sure they don't get seen by the family, and tell them to read some old Transformer G1 style comic books to learn more about what Transformers are. I absolutely love this because the back of the comic book is a homage to the old 80s Mile High comic order forms, which were all over 80s comic books back in the day. You even see the giant 50-cent each issue right in the center, which was very telling of the Mile High comic book thing. I'll obviously post the image and you could see and compare. So that's a nice little touch. Very, very Marvel's 80s. You would see them always in the 80s and early 90s Marvel books back in the day in their advertising. So nice to see that. The following morning, the kids, they want to go out hanging out with the Transformers and do stuff. Obviously, Dot, the mom, she leaves for work. And they go out and they play hide and seek and have all kinds of hijinks and everything. And then we clearly see that clearly reading the comic books didn't teach them anything about disguise, which are one of the main parts of being a Transformer. Robbie opts to ask his dad to tell them about the history of the Transformers and have the 2 bots listen in, hiding in the background. And they have a little outdoor picnic, and we learn about the history of the Transformers. And this is where things get a little crazy and loaded. So from what I could tell, this is an alternate take on the Generation 1 Season 1 toy line. A lot of things are changed here. So they still come to Earth in 1984, and they still start the Great War. But it looks like they came to Earth via a space bridge rather than some spacefaring thing like the Ark or the Nemesis and that stuff. And of course, by not going by the Ark or the Nemesis, Elita 1 is now coming to Earth via the space bridge. Bumblebee is left behind, but then there's some conflicting stuff with there because he's left behind, but then we see him in a scene later on Earth with Spike Witwicky and the mom Dot. So I don't know what the timeline is with that. And speaking of the timeline, the Autobots team up clearly with the humans in the 80s because we see Dot in the 80s with the Autobots, but we also see Bumblebee with Spike on his shoulder, and it's clearly 1980s Spike when they're fighting the Decepticons. And in that same scene, we see a very young Robbie and a toddler Mo in this scene. And so if this was in the 80s or even the early 90s, these kids would be in their 20s and 30s by now. So I don't know what the timeline is here. So are these scenes in the 80s and the 90s? If it kind of confirms that by Spike being there. If that's not the case, does the show itself of Earthspark in its present day, is that happening in the 90s? I don't think that's possible because they have smartphones and they're concerned with Wi-Fi, which at minimum is 2007, 2008. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading too much into this, but it's like the timeline's weird. By the kids, just the kids being in that shot right away confuses everything. But anyway, so getting back to that flashback, Prime destroys the space bridge. Bumblebee is apparently stranded back on Cybertron, and somehow that ends the war, and Megatron joins up with Prime, and that is that. We don't find out what happens to the spare Decepticons, but I think that's going to be a big part of the ongoing story in this. It's all kind of vague right now, but hopefully we'll learn more in future episodes, which I think that's going to be a large part of it, and which I think is actually going to make it interesting, because writing it in a way that you always have to watch future episodes to know what happened in the past, and it's unlocking those secrets and stuff. So that's a nice touch. I like that. Anyways, we flash forward back to the present, and Dot, the mom, is driving down the road where she finds the wreckage from the battle between the arachnoids and the government vehicles of Ghost that the kids saw just the night before. She goes, oh, what's going on here? Elita and Optimus show up. We learn that they know each other, of course, because she worked with them in the past. And we learned that Optimus actually was the one who had her relocated to Witwicky to keep her close to the Ghost government agency and the Autobots. And then Megatron shows up, and we're like, ooh, what's going on here? And that is that. That's the end of episode 1. Of course, we know kind of a follow-up to that from some of the trailers we saw online, how it works out with her and Megatron, how they're actually know each other and they're close. But we'll save that for another time. Just before the episode is over, the credits roll. And just a few things I want to mention with the credits here, because there actually is some stuff to mention here. So again, we learn that the mother's name is Dot. We learn that the father's name is Alex. The episode is dedicated to, well, probably the whole series dedicated in loving memory to Brian Goldner. Brian Goldner was the former CEO of Hasbro who passed away October 12th, 2021. We did a whole segment about Brian and the history and his life and everything, and how important he was to Transformers and its success and its growth that we have today. So check out that individual segment that I did about him, because you'll learn how important that guy was and why he was dedicated in loving memory to this series. Another big thing here in the credits, which gives us a lot of insight, is they mention here in the credits in the voice cast, there's a character here by Quintus Prime. And Quintus Prime, I think, was the voice that we heard in the cave that was saying Legacy of Hope, because it's the only character I could think of that had a line in this that would make sense. And when you think about it, it does make sense, because Quintus Prime was one of the original 13 Primes, which is a big deal to begin with. He was a scientist who was obsessed with like creating life and seeding the universe and everything. And, you know, he always wanted to just create the next evolution of Transformers and stuff. And in a lot of ways, I think that's what's going on here. He would later go on to create the Quintessons, which would then betray him. And supposedly, we weren't never confirmed, but supposedly killed him in one form of continuity. And then, of course, those Quintessons would go to Cybertron, and we all know the story that goes from there within the Generation 1 continuity, depending on your choice of origin. So I guess maybe Quintus Prime at some point came to Earth and seeded it with this kind of Cybertronian technology, and that the Earth-born Cybertronians here of Twitch and Thrash are birthed out of Quintus Prime's technology. But again, reading too much into it, but very interesting to say the least. So that's it, more or less. That's the first episode, but I really like what I see thus far. Voice acting's pretty good. Animation is really good. I'm very happy. I mean, I'm still, there's two things that still kind of like, I'm not a big fan of how Optimus looks without the battle mask. It still looks kind of weird to me. I guess I'm just going to have to get used to it. I find that Mo's eyes are way bigger than everyone else's eyes. And, you know, that's fine when I feel like she's like an anime character in a non-anime show. Like, you know, Robbie's eyes are fine. The family's eyes, hers are very large. Maybe they just want to make her look really cute or something. So they make her eyes very large, but wow, she has very huge eyes. Aside from that, not much else I could really mention in terms of animation. As someone that grew up in the black community and everything, I really like how well they did their hair. Let's put it this way. There's even a trailer where it shows them wearing wave caps when they go to sleep. That is such a black culture thing. So whoever did this really knows that very well. I love it. I think it looks really good. I like the style. What more could I say, really? I mean, it's really good looking stuff. The voice acting, I like all the voice acting. Again, the Optimus one, I think I'm just going to have to get used to it at this point. That's Alan Turdrick, whatever his name is there. He was the guy who was in Dark of the Moon. I don't know. When it's not Peter Cullen or someone who's, a lot more Peter Cullen sounding, even like a Neil Kaplan or, Gary Chalk could do his own Optimus, but Gary Chalk's amazing. But I don't know. All the other voice acting's pretty good otherwise, so not much really I complain about that. Music, I love the music. I don't know what it is. They have the Autobots show up, and then they play like triumphant, almost 80s kind of sounding music. I really like the music in this, so that's good. Atmosphere is good. Backgrounds are good. Nice environments. So looks visually nice. The voice acting's pretty good. The music is really good. I like what they're doing with the characters. There seems to be a lot of good deep cuts in the background. Look, just a 20-minute episode. And already I'm seeing like a whole bunch of deep cuts of 80s, nostalgia and all kinds of little things there. Transformers lore, Transformers history, some stuff that either is a coincidence or they're really hardcore fans that really like to do those winking and nods. I like what I see. I like it a lot. Not much really else I could say after that. I can't wait to see episode 2 and see where this goes. Looking really good thus far, Transformers Earthspark. I like what I see. And again, 20-minute episodes. I love Transformers Cyberverse, but its biggest flaw was that they were 10-minute episodes. These are 20-minute episodes. Actually, I have one complaint. Only one complaint. It doesn't have an intro. Maybe it does have an intro, but this one just kind of had the quick, just show the logo of the show and that's it, 5-second thing. I love intros. I'm an 80s, 90s kid, and intros are such a great part of Transformers. And Transformers Prime had a great intro. Cyberverse had a great intro. So I kind of like, that tradition of Transformers having really cool intros, even if it's 15 seconds. Do a 15-second intro or, a 20-second intro. Hopefully it doesn't take away too much in their opinion. But, I mean, man, it'd be nice to have a cool intro for this one, for this series. Maybe Japan, when they import it, they'll make a cool intro to make up for it. Who knows? But I dig it. I like it. Let me know what you think if you get to see this, because it's going to be airing November 11th. That's when it's going to be airing officially for the United States on Paramount Plus and on Nickelodeon. Let me know what you think of this episode. I think it's amazing. I think it's really good. It looks like there's a lot going on here. And I like that they create a past. That way, when you watch the show, you're slowly unearthing that past, and that past is based on stuff that we're interested in, all that Generation 1 stuff, what was going on there, all those little nods and hints and everything. So there's a lot of cool stuff to unearth. Let me know what you think when you watch this. Pretty cool stuff. And hey, Transformers Earthspark, looking pretty good.